Now today we're continuing the work on our 2010 Subaru Impreza. If you've been following along, I just received back the cylinder heads. They look great. I'll talk more about this in the next episode of precisely what was done and the costs associated. But today we're just dealing with the oil pan. Now, how do you do this job while the engine is still installed on your vehicle? And then we're going to get right into it. Number one is you have to raise the engine. And what I'll be doing is including two links in the description box below. One link will be for the valve cover gasket replacement video that we did many months ago. And in that video, I show on how you can jack the engine off the engine mounts. And that's precisely what you need to do here. So if you take a look, just to give you another vantage point, this is an engine mount and this is an engine mount. 14mm fasteners, and they sit. That's the driver's side mount, passenger side, okay? So you remove those two fasteners, and then you have a fastener right here that you need to remove. This is a stopper that sits on the transmission housing. Make sure you remove this because it could place a lot of stress right here if you don't. So remove the stopper, just like this, the way you see it. Remove the two fasteners off the mounts, and then you can jack up the engine with a block of wood, use a floor jack, and that's it. You don't have to bring it too high, you just have to give yourself some working room. The other thing that you may have to remove is the exhaust. If you need to remove the exhaust, I'll include another link when we did a catalytic converter replacement video, and you can see exactly and how you can, it's not that bad to be quite honest, on how to remove everything. So that being said, let's just tackle the job. Now you have a number of 10mm fasteners running around the oil pan. Now to remove these, really they're not very tight at all. Only around 5 foot-pounds from the factory. So once you remove all of the fasteners, we'll go ahead and remove the oil pan from the engine block. So now I have all of the fasteners removed, as well as the oil filter. Now my plan of attack is the best bet to remove this pan will be right here. In other words, you'll have the cross member here, you have the two engine mounts, you can't get it from the rear. The front you have the oil, the timing cover. So your best bet, your best mode of attack is trying to get this at least loosened up at this point. Now, Subaru, they do not use a gasket. In other words, they don't use something like this from the factory. They use RTV Sealant. Okay, something like this. Meaning after 10 years in this case, 150,000 miles, this thing is really solidified on the block. If I grab a mallet, just start knocking it, I mean, you'll be here all day trying to get this loose. You may think of instinctively, let me grab a flathead and try to pry it off, but you can really score up the aluminum block. So your best bet, now this is something I showed years ago on a Nissan Maxima oil pan gasket video that I did. Fantastic little tool. This is around $10. I'll include a link in our Amazon affiliate site if you do need something like this. But the whole point is you want to try to fit it right about there. And then you can start knocking the handle with a hammer. So something like this. And then right about here, you can just start lightly trying to grip on that RTV sealant. You don't want to go too heavy because you don't want to miss the tool and then knock into the block. Okay, so you just want to be gentle when you do this. And as you can see, it's piercing in there. In my case, I can even grab the handle, place it on top, and do it like this. And so it's breaking that loose, and with enough patience, it will start to become loose from the block. I could probably pry it off, but okay, there we have it. So now we have the tedious task of removing the old gasket maker from the block and the oil pan. What I tend to use, I'll start with a razor blade and just clean off as much of the old gasket maker as possible. Go around the entire perimeter, and then once I have as much as I can remove with the blade, I'll jump over to a Scotch pad, and then just get the surface really nice and clean. Again, both the block and the oil pan, and then we can mate everything back together. And then I'm just going to spray some brake clean. Just wipe off any leftover dirt, grime, oil. Okay, so the pan is nice and dry, it's clean. I also sprayed some brake clean to make sure that the surface, there's just no oil on the surface of the pan. When you apply the RTV sealant, again, you can use a gasket. Felpro makes a gasket for this oil pan, but Subaru recommends RTV sealant. So when you apply the sealant, just make sure you get behind the holes for the fasteners. You don't want to go in front because you can develop a leak. So that's the main thing. Make sure you get behind these holes, apply it or reinstall it back on the block, and let it sit for about an hour before you fully torque it. Okay, grab the fasteners. Again, you're not going to torque it down just yet. Just insert the fasteners and let it sit for at least an hour. So it's been just about an hour, and I want to tighten down the fasteners. Now, Subaru, they don't recommend any specific sequence on how to tighten these fasteners. In other words, some manufacturers, they recommend going in a crisscross fashion. Subaru just states tighten these down to roughly 4 foot-pounds. It's 3.7 foot-pounds. So if you do want to use a torque wrench, get something that can read in inch-pounds. So 4 foot-pounds would be 48 inch-pounds. If you go too tight on these, they will snap on you, so just be delicate. If you don't have a torque wrench, don't worry about it. Just make them nice and snug. So for example, I feel some resistance, maybe a little bit more, and that's perfect. So you don't have to over tighten them. Just go ahead, make them all nice and tight, and that's it, you're all set. So that's what I'll do right now. I'll also change the motor mount since I'm here. And then in the next episode, we'll reinstall the cylinder heads and get this vehicle back up and running. So until then, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.